The opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and don't necessarily reflect the views of WOWT.
Welcome once again to another episode of the Becca's Talking Podcast. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the Becca's Talking Facebook page, and make sure you join us each and every Tuesday when a new podcast comes up. And I'm very interested in today's conversation. My guest is Leo Lewis II,
yes,
who is, if you saw the movie My Omaha that had a limited run there at the Dundee Theater a couple of weeks ago, if you saw that movie, you were a main part of it. And the movie itself is a fascinating story of the filmmaker. And we did the podcast with the filmmaker, by the way. You can check that out on the YouTube channel. But the film was basically about the racial divide in Omaha at the same time while the filmmaker was trying to fix the divide between him and his father, who had become rather a radical MAGA person, and they were trying to get back to, being father and son. It's a compelling story, and it's not streaming yet, but it will be. Matter of fact, you might have some information on any news about the movie My Omaha.
You can go to myomahafilm.com. And you can request a screening in your local area. So if anybody goes to the website, they can request a screening. And then if they get a small gathering together, the film will be screened. Because the goal is to start the conversation to make sure that people really understand what they're getting from the film so far.
Yeah.
Eventually, I think Nick will go into more distribution, but right now that's his perspective.
It really is. If you got maybe a church group or a social group or something like that where you want to show this movie,
Yep.
Go to myomaha.com and request a screening. And because it truly is, I talked to a lot of people that saw the movie,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody had just high praise for it.
Yeah, that's what I've gotten here too.
Yeah. Now, I met you years ago when you were in charge of the Malcolm X Center here in Omaha.
Yep, the Malcolm X Memorial Foundation.
And you're in charge of that, and we talked a little bit. I don't really know you that well, but we've had nice conversations in the past. So, if I were to describe who Leo Lewis II is, what would I say?
You would say human first, and then you would say that he serves his community as a community organizer, primarily in North Omaha, but he has ambitions to serve other communities across the nation and possibly globally if he can.
Community organizer. What does that mean?
A lot of people ask that question.
Well, I'm not a lot of people, but I'll ask it anyway.
And the way I answer that question first is it's the job that Barack Obama had before he became the president of the United States. It is a very high level of organizing with people being at the center of it. So what you do is you work with different people with different interests and try to find common ground so that we can achieve a common goal. So if there was an issue of, let's say, food security, like right now, food stamps or EBT is being threatened at a national level. It's affecting 41 million people. A community organizer would work with different organizations, institutions, individuals, and possibly businesses or systems to create a solution that could benefit all 41 million people or 42 million people who are dealing with that issue.
How do you make a living being a community organizer?
And you don't make a living being a community organizer. It's typically a labor of love, and it's something that you have to really just kind of build your way into. I was a volunteer coordinator at one point. I was a gang interventionist at one point. I've been a father for over 20 years, and just all of my compounded work that I've done in community ultimately culminated into describing me as a community organizer. I didn't know what that was before until about 2018 when a group, Nebraska Civic Engagement Table, created an organizer school, and they started talking about community organizers, and I had the opportunity to go attend it, and I learned about community organizing at a different level, and I said, oh, that's the work I've been doing all these years. I thought it was just helping out the people in the community. I didn't know it was community organizing.
Okay, you talked about community organizer. Now, when you talk about primarily in North Omaha, right? Is that primarily where your focus is?
Primarily, but I have to travel different places to get different things done, yeah.
Okay. What I know of North Omaha, and I'm an old white guy, so I know a little bit, but not enough. What I know about it is that there are a lot of different factions there that are fighting amongst each other for power, for attention, whatever it may be. Matter of fact, in the movie My Omaha, you have a rather heated exchange with the Empowerment Network. How do you organize all these different factions when you've got them basically not working together?
Well, number one, I think that The people in North Omaha, especially those who are looking to make change, are people who recognize the constant systemic oppression of North Omaha. So it's not necessarily fighting among each other. It's them trying to fight for a position that is often limited by those who are truly in power for just a few to make it through that door. For example, when you see me in my Omaha, I'm actually speaking to the executive director of the Empowerment Network, which is a group that in its inception, when it started, was a group that was intended on bringing Black-led organizations together who were from North Omaha. However, it was funded by philanthropists at the time who really wanted to see that initiative thrive, but they also wanted control over that initiative. And so that initiative had a direction set for it without the majority of North Omaha's input, because philanthropists were the ones throwing the money into it and saying, here's how you should function, here's how you should operate. And for a certain period of time, they operated that way. By 2015, I had already stopped dealing with that particular organization because I seen that they could not make the moves that would really cause systemic change for a lot of people in North Omaha. So by the time 2015 came, when you see me storming into that meeting, I recognized that that particular institution was not understanding the will of North Omaha and wasn't operating on the will of North Omaha. And so we had a conflict, and it was public.
But I assume when you say these philanthropic organizations, you're referring to white people, right?
I think most of the philanthropic organizations in Omaha are, quote, white people.
Yeah.
Quote, white people.
I know. But that's what I'm saying. It was a thing where, they were doing it, I think, because their hearts were in the right place, right? What was wrong with what they were doing then? What happened?
I'm sure philanthropy has good intentions, but also philanthropy has its own systems and its own intentions for outcomes that it wants to see. And those outcomes have to match the intentions of the people that it serves. So if the people have one intention and the philanthropists have the same intention, then we should easily be able to bring that together and work forward. But if the philanthropists at some level decide we want to throw in a little change because we'd like to see this happen, that's when the intentions start to differ. And that's what we see happen often with nonprofit organizations, not only in North Omaha, but across the entire nation. It's called mission creep. It actually has a term for it, where an organization will start to deviate from its original intent into a different intention because either an outside force or an internal force shifted the original intent of the organization.
I think that in any organization, you're always going to have this sort of a, difference of opinions and stuff about things. But can you work together as a, with your different, can you work together with your different perspectives and not necessarily be fighting amongst each other? In other words, could you work closer with the Empowerment Network without having to necessarily agree with everything that they were doing?
Of course, I currently do.
Okay. What does that look like then?
Yeah, as a community organizer, what I learned, especially with my gang intervention background, is that I was able to recognize when large-scale events, especially ones that happened in North Omaha, were going to take place, and there was the possibility of a violent interruption going to happen, that I could predict and also create an environment that would shift the possible acts of violence from taking place. And so what I would do is I would work with organizations and help them change their security plan, change their public safety plan, cooperate not only with the institutions that exist for public safety, but also other nonprofits, get together a team of volunteers and what we call community safety interventionists, and go out and squash violence before it even took place at these major events in North Omaha. And that effort is being led by the Omaha 360, which contracts out with myself and a brother of mine with his organization Code Z, and we do community-led public safety.
Do you work with the Omaha Police Department in this regard?
We have to. We have to coordinate with the Omaha Police Department to ensure that we don't overlap what they're doing with their public safety plan.
Under Todd Schmatter, the Omaha Police Department have had a much better relationship with North Omaha than previous police chiefs, have they not?
I definitely agree. Definitely agree.
What have been the what are the main problems facing North Omaha right now? We look at North Omaha like it's this part of town that just its own little part of town, its own city, but it really, it's part of our whole metropolitan community.
Yeah.
What do we need to know about North Omaha that maybe people watching this podcast, listening to this podcast, might not know about it because they don't go up there?
Yeah, I think what people need to know is historically North Omaha used to be primarily white. white flight took place and a lot of whites moved out of North Omaha. Blacks, when they came here in the 1920s, actually settled in the south of Omaha because that's where the jobs were, the packing plants and the packing houses. They worked at the meat packing plant. As a matter of fact, Earl Little, Malcolm X's father, worked at the packing house, as well as the founder, Rowena Moore of the Malcolm X Memorial Foundation. She worked for the meat packing plant as well in South Omaha. A lot of them migrated north when opportunities of housing opened up in North Omaha, and a lot of whites said, well, we don't want to live next to any black people, so they moved out further west in Omaha. And then you created this void that now we know of as North Omaha being a predominantly black neighborhood. And even then, with the economic changes, more whites are moving back into North Omaha, as well as a Latino or Hispanic population is moving into North Omaha. So the black population that used to be the primary group of people in North Omaha is now being a little mixed. But North Omaha in general, when you talk about the challenges of North Omaha, is that it has always been a tailored part of town because of housing covenants and restrictive housing covenants.
Do you look at that as a good thing?
No, I don't think that's a good thing. I think that the individuals who wanted to settle in North Omaha and make it a home should have been able to purchase their homes and actually create neighborhoods and have it for lifetimes. Unfortunately, they were not able to do that due to policy changes.
What I mean when you say that more whites are moving to North Omaha, more Hispanics are moving to North Omaha, do you see that as a good thing?
I think that the black community needed to have its own space, much like other parts of the town, so that the black community could build a stronger economic base and also, again, have consistency of seeing the same type of environment for generations.
See, when I live in Dundee, and in my neighborhood, I've got immigrants, I've got African Americans, I've got white, I've got a little bit, and I like that. I like that diversity.
Yeah, I love diversity. However, I think it's very important that diversity does not come with redlining. It doesn't come with revitalization, aka gentrification, moving out groups of people and then sending them to another place so that major development can come in, and then bringing in other groups of people and culturally annihilating a group of people just for the sake of having access to either another part of town or closer to the riverside, etc.
So when you see something like the Sherwood Foundation doing the 75 North, is that the name of the project there?
Yeah,
on North 30th Street. When you see a project like that, which basically does gentrify that part of North Omaha. Do you have a problem with that?
I think that 75 North is a great project. I also think that 75 North needs to shift to ownership of individuals who are historically from North Omaha to have access to ownership in North Omaha.
We have this image of crime in North Omaha that maybe the other parts of town
don't have. Who has that image? Who's we?
we, the city in general.
Okay.
Wouldn't you agree?
No, I don't think so. I think that the media portrays North Omaha that way. However, I remember in 2011 when the Omaha World Herald put out a news story and they talked about shots fired calls. There were actually more shots fired calls in West Omaha than in North Omaha. However, also that same year, Omaha, Nebraska in general was slated to be the most dangerous place for black men to live in the United States. However, shot fired calls were higher in West Omaha than they were in North Omaha. But the media had portrayed North Omaha as the place where the most violence was taking place, even though shots were fired more in the suburbs.
Even with our conversation here, you started by saying that you were a gang interventionist.
Correct.
Okay, so that implies that there was a lot of crime in North Omaha.
No, it implies that there were gangs in my neighborhood. It doesn't imply there were gangs in North Omaha. I'm from North Omaha. There were gangs in North Omaha, just like there were gangs in Millard and there were gangs in West Omaha. However, me being a gang interventionist, there could very well be a gang interventionist in Millard as well.
Okay. And I'm not trying to.
No. I get it.
I'm not trying to. But it just seems that okay. So if that image is there, and you want to blame the media or whatever, that image is there. What is being done to change that image?
What is being done to change?
Yeah. What improvements are you seeing? What improvements are you making to make North Omaha not only a safer place, but also a place that people consider to be a safer place?
Well, I just told you what I do. I am now doing community-led public safety, which is a layer above gang intervention. There are still gang interventionists. There are still collaborations with individuals who work with security, who work with public safety organizations, and we are all still collaborating to make sure that North Omaha stays safe. We're also trying to increase the economics of North Omaha so that there's more cooperative economics taking place so that individuals don't feel so desperate and feel that that they need to do anything out of desperation.
You're also working with school kids, right, and in the educational process for your community, are you not?
Yeah, I am.
What are you doing with them?
So what I actually do is I support a homeschool cooperative. It's called Leaders to Legends Homeschool Co-op. It's for individuals who decided to take their children out of the public school system and homeschool themselves because they realized that they were experiencing a lot of discrimination, a lot of segregation, a lot of unfair treatment in the public school systems. And so they decided to just take education into their own hands. So I support them. And I do a lot of education and program curriculum development and volunteering.
I've used the analogy before. I am not denying that there is indeed bigotry, that there is racism. I'm not denying that in the least.
Right on.
But at the same time, I also don't think that everything is bigotry or racism.
Right.
Would you agree with me on that or not?
I don't think everything is bigotry or racism.
No, but I mean,
not
like,
at all.
but like, I guess the point I'm trying to make is the analogy that I've made before is like, if somebody applies for a job and they're black or they don't get the job, it's not necessarily because they were black that they didn't get the job. But I think sometimes it's portrayed that that's what the reason is.
Oh, I understand that perspective. However, I would say as long as there's white people and as long as there's black people, there's racism. And the reason why is because whiteness is temporary. It is an option. You don't have to be white. I know you know your lineage and your heritage. What might that be?
I'm Czechoslovakian. Yeah, Czech.
See,
yeah.
you know you're Czechoslovakian. I don't know what I am, so I have to identify as black. But you don't have to identify as white, but you choose to. So most white people choose to identify as white. So mostly white people are perpetuating racism by perpetuating the term white when they could just say, hey, I'm Tom, I'm Czechoslovakian, instead of saying I'm white.
Hey, I'm Tom, I'm American, but the reality is I don't think of myself as white. I don't think of myself as being Czech. I mean, I enjoyed growing up because my parents were raised in a Czech neighborhood in Cleveland. So when we go visit grandma and grandpa, there would be the Czech food, pork and dumplings and all that stuff. And so I enjoy that. And I've been to the Czech Republic, and it's a beautiful country, and I've enjoyed that. Yes. So I appreciate all of that. But at the same time, I don't think of myself as white. I don't think of myself as Czech. I just think of myself as being Tom. I mean, do you think of yourself as being Leo, or do you think of yourself as being black?
Well, unfortunately, they have to be both. I'd love to think of myself as part of the Cherokee tribe or part of the tribe that I knew back in when the time of my family or lineage, knowing my heritage and knowing my culture. But I don't know that because it was stripped from us. So now I have to do the hard work of going back to find that so I have an identity. The reason why there's gangs in the first place is because gangs are groups of people that form together to protect their interests. And that could be any group. That could be that could be a Czech group of quote gangs. That could be the same thing. Religion could be the same thing.
Exactly.
We know that. And actually, when you think back in the past, if you ever seen the movie Gangs of New York, the first gangs were so-called white gangs. Gangs is an American creation. So when we talk about gang, often people associate that with Afro-American or black people. But the truth is gangs historically were white first. Black people adopted the concept of gang because they saw the Irish gangs. They saw the Italian gangs, especially in Chicago. They were really heavy. And they would form these different clubs and they would go attack different black neighborhoods. And those black neighborhoods didn't have, quote, an identity that was similar to their heritage, like you could have a Czech gang or Irish gang. So black people just banded together and they started naming themselves after whatever they created. And then they formed their gangs to defend themselves from the onslaught, especially in the 1920s and 30s when black people were starting to get voting rights in major cities.
I will say that, like with Hollywood and the movies, we romanticize the mafia. We romanticize the white gangs. Hey, it's Godfather's Pizza.
Of course, there's black people with Tony with the actor on them, but they think it's Tony Montana, and they're walking around with him on their arm. Yeah.
I mean, okay, but at the same time, if there's a movie with black gangs, they tend to be scarier. They tend to be more violent. They tend to be, I don't know, maybe it's because my perspective as a white guy, they do tend to be approach in a different way than, like I said, the mafia.
I think the media is interesting because you're telling me that when Al Capone pulls out a machine gun with a drum on it and shoots up an entire bar, and then a guy on the street corner goes and shoots at a group of guys standing on the corner, that the violence is different, that one is scarier than the other, or are they both the same?
No, I'm not arguing with you on that. They are, but I do think there is sort of I don't know, maybe it's just the culture, or whatever, and maybe it's different, like from your perspective,
or maybe it's just the bias and racism that actually does exist.
I'd say bias more than racism.
Okay, so let me explain the definition of racism. Racism is a system of advantage based on race, which takes me back to the beginning of our conversation. The reason why we don't need to, especially as individuals who are, quote, Caucasian or white, need to call themselves white, because that is a perpetuation of racism. Once you identify as white and then you build systems, then you're creating a system of advantage based on race. You didn't have to identify as white. And here's a great example. When you go to get your driver's license at the DMV, it has no reason. There's no reason for it to say white, black, Hispanic other, Asian Pacific Islander, or Negro or black. It doesn't need to say that. But if you go to the DMV, you notice that is on the application when you sign up for your driver's license. So if we're not a country that doesn't want to perpetuate race, why would we even ask a question about race?
I would say that maybe that's just from an old day, back in the old days when you didn't have your picture on the driver's license.
Would have been, but they could have got rid of it.
Well, they could have, but hey,
all this DEI
stuff. It's the government.
All the 2020 DEI stuff, they can do that.
Yeah.
I mean, we got rid of food stamps. We made 41 million people starve, but we couldn't get rid of the racial identification on the driver's license. A simple box can be removed that wouldn't harm any families. However, we're going to starve out 41 million people because Democrats and Republicans can't get along.
But you would agree with me that those are not all African-American people that are being hurt by the food
Definitely,
stamps.
100%, because there's a majority of so-called whites who are on food stamps.
Well, they are white. So-called white.
No, the majority is statistically.
Yeah, well, the majority is also the population. I mean, if you're going purely by numbers, that would be the key.
No, percentage. Again, if we're going by population, we're still talking about percentages, right?
Uh-huh.
And so the percentages of whites that are on food stamps, if they are the majority, actually that number should be lower. If they're a majority of the population, that should be a lower statistical number, rather than African Americans being 36% and whites being 47%, or whatever that number is. I'm sorry, those aren't exactly the numbers, but we do know that whites are the majority of the food stamp users.
Going back to the heritage discussion.
Yeah.
I did a 23andMe.
Okay.
Okay, and I am primarily from that Bohemian region of the Czech Republic.
Okay.
But there is also some Irish in me.
Right on. That's good.
I also was told that I have a higher than average percentage of Neanderthal.
It's not a surprise, Tom. Yeah. I'm just messing with you. I'm just joking.
What, are you some kind of a racist?
No, is that a racist question? Is that a racist? I didn't create the science. I didn't do the science.
So anyway, the point is that I'm not purely Czech. The point I'm making with all of this, in that, I mean, I know from talking with many African American friends that they have an African connection, not necessarily the country or the town, because I don't even know what the hometown of my ancestors. I don't even know where that is. I just know they were in this basic region. And I've tried to do the genealogy on this.
Yeah, understood.
But but it seems that you may not know the specific country, but you do know the continent, right? I mean, does that not fill that same void, or is that a problem?
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, okay. So
I don't have a 23andMe, by the way. I've never done it. I've never done Ancestry.com or none of those things.
Yeah, but I'm just saying is that when you look for that identity, whereas my identity might be the Czech Republic. Yeah. All right. Your identity might be Africa, the continent itself.
There's a difference. See, the difference between me and you is you could go ask probably your father, your grandfather exactly where you're from, and they probably told you that.
Well, actually, we didn't. They don't know.
Oh, you did? Okay. So you researched it. But even when you researched it, you'll be able to confirm it through heirlooms, through things that you could find, right? Like neighborhoods. You talked about being in a neighborhood in Cleveland.
I will say on my dad's side, I did find the ship's registry when my great grandparents on my dad's side came over. And I have that framed in my house.
Yes.
So
it's okay. So you have an heirloom that shows exactly how your family kind of got here and stayed here.
Right.
I don't have that, and the majority of Afro-American families don't have that here. And so I'd have to do an Ancestry.com or something, and it would trace me back to so-called Africa. However, again, when, what time, what year, when did that take place? You know exactly when your family came in on a boat. I don't know when my family came in on a boat or an airplane or teleported over here. I don't know. And so that's the difference. So when we talk about looking for identity, I was told I'm an African American. I just found out in my own personal family that both my grandfathers, from my grandmother on my father's side, my grandmother on my mother's side, was an indigenous native to this land. Both of my grandfathers. That's what I just found out like 3 years ago. But my whole life I went through high school and in grammar school that told me that, well, you probably were from Africa and your family probably came here on a slave ship, which is definitely not true if we know that there were free Afro-Americans in the North that came from Europe to the northern cities and lived in New York and Massachusetts and Boston, etc. And then there was a slave trade that came through the South. So we really don't know. And then we have to ask the question, what happened to the indigenous people who were here, the Cahokia people, the Mississippian people, all the so-called Native Americans, the Samoans, etc. We know that there was a group of people here, and then history tells us they disappeared. Well, could it be that those people had their names changed and they were called Negro or Black, and then they were assimilated into different cultures? Because the records does reflect, if you go back and look at the census, that the census shows that when they could not classify certain Indians or certain so-called Native Americans, they actually classified them as Negroes. So a lot of them were godfathered into being Black or Negro or African American. And so we have a whole lot of homework to do to figure out who we are beyond ancestry.
I find that fascinating myself.
No problem.
I find it fascinating. I don't necessarily find that all that important to who I am. Why is that important?
It's always important. I think it's important to you. Are you married?
No.
Okay. You've dated, haven't
Oh
you?
yeah, most definitely, yes.
Okay.
I got relationship stories, but well, that's a podcast for another day.
Okay, so in those relationships, do you inquire about where the young lady's family's from? Or have you inquired?
It's small talk. I mean,
it is. It's important small talk.
It's small talk.
It's important small talk, though. It's important small talk. You're like, hey, you're brunette, you're blonde. Are you from blah, 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 right? Imagine not being able to even have that casual conversation. I'm talking to another young lady who looks as dark as me, but she doesn't know where she's from. I don't know where I'm from, and we decide we're going to make kids. We don't know our blood types. We don't know what things that are good for us or bad for us. I don't even know why she cooks a certain quiche the way she does. And maybe she has come from the West Philippines. She looks like me, but she's from the West Philippine Islands or whatever. And she says, well, in my culture, here's. And she has that history. She has that heritage. What she can now do is she can have a sense of pride in who she is. And also she has the cultural foundation that if she wanted to do economics, if she wanted to share traditions, she could do so. But if I don't have those traditions, I don't have those economics, I feel lost if I don't know who I am. Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of people, especially in the Afro-American culture, have to do, is recreate or reinvent an identity that didn't exist before.
And I don't mean to, that's may come across sounding a lot harsher than I mean.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's a great investigation. I appreciate it.
No. I mean, I really am genuinely trying to learn from this, okay? But why can't you just, and for lack of a better term, get over it, and say, okay, this is, I have friends that were adopted, okay? They don't know who their real birth parents are.
Right.
Okay? And I admit it may bother them a little bit, but it's still, they've gotten over it,
Most of my friends who were adopted or have been adopted, they go seeking for their parents later in life. They try to find out where I'm from, who I am.
I'm not saying they haven't looked. I'm just saying they don't know. Yeah,
I'm saying, and unfortunately, most of the time that takes place after crisis. It takes place after a bad breakup, or they find out they have some type of autoimmune disease or something happens, and they go, I need to know where I'm from or who my parents were. At some point in your life, you have to figure out who your people are. And imagine going through your entire life not knowing who your people are, then you're going to try to create a sense of community, try to create a sense of culture, and try to hold on to that as much as you can. But imagine that being ripped apart because a developer wants to come in and put a new housing building in your neighborhood. So you didn't even get a whole generation in before you had to move out of your neighborhood, and the developer came and mowed it down, and you go back to that neighborhood and it doesn't even look the same. So the park bench you used to sit on, or the girl you tried to talk to, or the place you scraped your knee is gone now. So your own collective memory is not even there. So now you got to start all over with a whole nother generation, a whole nother set of children who don't know where they're from, who they are, and what their history really is. Here's the thing. I will say this. Imagine when you go into South Omaha, for example. Yeah. South Omaha is a heavily Mexican, Latino population.
No,
right?
But it used to be Czech and Polish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you know this history.
Yeah.
But now we know that it's a Mexican, Latino, Hispanic culture down there, right? And if you're in the right spot in South Omaha, you could go down a small stretch and not understand what the name of the business is on the door because it's written in another language, right? Now imagine walking into that business and going to go spend your money and the person doesn't speak English. If you are a person who doesn't speak that language, you can't do commerce.
Right.
So that's what's important about having a sense of culture and identity, because your sense of culture and identity causes you to want to work with people who speak like you speak, look like you look, and understand your needs. And so the reason why North Omaha's black community doesn't have the same thriving 24th Street as South Omaha's thriving 24th Street is because we can't name businesses in our language and speak in our language and do business in our language in our community, because it's always being interfered with, because we are mixed into this identity of being so-called American but never really truly being accepted as so-called American. So whenever we try to build our own, we never get a chance to truly build it. But if we had a cultural foundation, we would be able to do that business among ourselves and then have that self-reliance to build our institutions and to build up our businesses, much like other cultures can.
Are you saying that the African American culture in this country, for the most part, don't feel American?
No, I think I'd like to put it like the Pastor John Fry in Chicago did. The African American culture in this country is the locked out American. We're Americans, but we're locked out of all the resources, locked out of the access, locked out of the ability to truly achieve the American dream.
Is that, and I mean, and I look at people that I know that are very successful African Americans. Okay, and I mean, obviously, probably the main one is Barack Obama.
Right.
But you can go down the list here of doctors and lawyers and teachers, people that have done very well for themselves who are African American. You say they're locked out. Is so much of that the mindset? You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'll put it this way.
Right.
Going back to you asked,
I love it. I love it.
If I date and stuff, right?
Yeah.
I ask a woman to date, and she says no. Okay, now is it because I'm fat? Is it because I'm old? Is it because she's gay? Is it because she has, she's married? Is it?
Right.
Because, I mean, there could be, maybe she's busy that night. There could be a million reasons why. But if I'm looking at it like, oh, she said no because I'm fat, and then my mindset is then, whereas the reality is that may not be the reason at all.
Right. I get it. I totally
so
understand.
that's the point I'm making here. When you say, when you look at yourself as being, a Black American that's left out of the culture, is that a lot of that? Is that the mindset?
No. Again, we're locked out. True, but one of the things is we set the culture of America in a lot of ways. We're not all of it. We don't control the policy. We don't control the systems or the institutions. However, we do set a lot of the cultural standards in America. Unfortunately, when we set those cultural standards, they turn into capitalism and they become perverted. But we originally set those cultural standards. When you look at things like music, rock and roll, the history of rock and roll, the history of hip hop, and other things that have been stolen from Afro-Americans, we are the ones that set that foundation. We set that culture. However, to speak to your point, especially when you make the point of, well, me being rejected by a woman, couldn't it just be just that she just didn't want to be with me, etc.? I'd say look at it like this. Name one Black genius that you know.
Personally, that I know? I mean,
famously.
Black genius, Tyson, the astrophysicist.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yes.
Okay, give me another one.
Okay, I have a tough time.
All right, that's it.
Okay, name a white genius. I mean, I'm trying to think of
Albert Einstein.
Okay.
Stephen Hawking.
All right.
Who else we want to go with? Bill Gates.
Then you tell. Well, okay. Now that's depending on your definition of genius too, probably.
Elon Musk.
But
Jeff Bezos. They consider these guys geniuses. They're considered Mensa. Their Mensa scores are off through the charts, and these guys are supposed to be in the top percentile of intelligence, right? But the reason why I'm saying that is because the cultural capital of this country and the social cultural capital allowed them to be identified as genius. How many Black geniuses are running around here that are not allowed to be recognized as Black geniuses? Einstein failed in math in elementary school, dropped out of school, and still became the number one physicist in the entire world historically as compared to everyone when it comes to physics. However, there is probably a number of Black children who are failing math right now who are smarter than Einstein was in his day and will never be recognized as genius because there's no social system that identifies with his culture that will pick him out of the crowd and say, this kid is genius and we need to protect him and grow his genius. That's what happens, is that oftentimes Black people don't have access culturally because they're not considered a part of the culture to be lifted up and recognized when they possess things that a culture would normally want to identify as something great. that shows you how cultural capital works, and it shows you how whiteness can afford you elevation in society and how blackness can keep you out of elevation simply because of your color. Because a black child is rarely recognized as genius, even if he scores high on a Mensa test. We know there are ones that are, but they're not being propped up in the way Albert Einstein was.
But it's also a thing where maybe they just don't have the maybe the media resources behind them. And I mean, okay, for instance, you talk about this. I'm thinking about, well, no, but I'm thinking like the African American man on Shark Tank who did the FUBU shirts, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would put that guy as a genius. The guy's,
Damon,
I
Damon
forget
John,
his name, though.
Damon John.
Damon John, yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, so there are people like that, that maybe I just don't trip off the top of my tongue. But I mean,
right? But why not? Why not? Why is he not propped up the way Albert Einstein was? And why is he not propped up the way Bill Gates was? The reason why know him,
George Washington Carver.
The reason why
there are people like that, right?
Why are we going back in time? Why can't
you're
we?
the one who went Einstein. Yeah. Oh, I see. You bring back Einstein, but I can't bring George Washington Carver.
No, you can't. Definitely, I appreciate that. No, George Washington Carver was a genius in his right. Yes, for sure.
Okay, and that. So, I find this topic fascinating. Because as a kid, I grew up during the civil rights era, and I remember all of the conversations in that. I was a paper boy in a white neighborhood. An African American family moved in to the neighborhood, and some of my customers said, "Well, if you deliver papers to that N-word, if you deliver papers, then I'm going to cancel my subscription." And my dad told me, he said, "Let them cancel," and I did. Because these people, I wanted them to feel at home in this neighborhood.
Yeah, that's noble.
Unfortunately, they didn't, and they left shortly thereafter. Yeah. But I think we've improved so much since that time.
I would say we've improved in certain areas, but not so much. Have you ever read the book, The Education of a Wasp?
No, I haven't, no.
Definitely read that book. Lois Stolvey, read that book. It's about a woman who was I believe she started in Philadelphia. She moved to Omaha, Nebraska in the 1960s during the civil rights era. And she bought a house out in, I forget where it was, but it was a primarily white neighborhood. And she said, my children don't have access to other cultural groups of people. I would love it if there was access to a black person so that my children can have a different experience in life. And so in the book, she goes to the superintendent of the school district at that time, who was a white male, and she says, hey, what do you think about hiring a black teacher? And this is when desegregation is in play, and now you can start to integrate the schools. And she asked the superintendent. The superintendent says, yeah, sure, I'd love for you to do that. She goes to the Urban League, which is a black-led institution in North Omaha, and she asked the Urban League to provide them a professional that could apply for the job as teacher. And so she does so. But when she goes back to her community, this primarily white community, and the homeowners association and group finds out that she's trying to integrate the school system, they turn on her. And then the story just snowballs from there, and she experiences so many things that Afro-Americans or blacks experience as a white woman. She experiences by proxy because she's now intertwined with the black experience, trying to make social advancement simply from, I just want to get a teacher to teach my kids.
You're going back 50 years or more for this story.
Yeah, I'm just giving you that context.
I know, context. But my point was that things are better now, and you're talking about something that happened 50 years ago.
Now, the reason why I'm doing that is because once you read the book, you will be able to compare it to today. That's why I went back. So now let's look at today, okay? How is Afro-Americans or black people the primary majority in West Omaha? Are we the majority in West Omaha?
West Omaha is primarily white, yes.
Okay, would you consider Omaha to be still segregated?
I think some of it is self-segregation.
Okay, would you consider it to be segregated is what I'm asking.
I would say so, yeah.
Okay.
But segregated just means, look, okay. I would say the same thing. I mentioned Dundee. Okay, so Dundee primarily is a lot more liberal than West Omaha. Yeah, is that a form of segregation?
Liberal and affluent, yeah. It's liberal and affluent.
What, West Omaha?
Both Dundee and West Omaha primarily.
Well, I mean, there's some affluence in both communities.
Definitely. How much affluence is in North Omaha? Not much. There wasn't a lot of affluence in North Omaha historically, even back in Lois Stolvey's time. So again, we're talking about things changing, right? The reason why I'm leaving that as a marker. This is 2025. Her book started in the 1960s. We're talking about almost 65 years. And you said things have changed a lot, right?
Yeah.
Afro-American children were the number one in suspensions in the 1990s. It's 2025, about 35 years later, African-American children are still the number one suspended group of children across the nation. We account for a third of all suspensions in the school systems. That historically was the thing then, is historically the thing now. African-American children were in 1973 considered the largest population of children with special needs because they were saying African-American children have special needs. And that's actually where special needs came from, is when desegregation took place, they created this concept of special needs so that they can remove Afro-American children out of the classroom so that the white teachers who now had these new integrated children coming in didn't have to deal with them. And that's in a book by a man named Michael Porter called Kill 'Em Before They Grow. You can go back and read that book. So when you see these things from 1970 all the way to 2025, school systems haven't changed. So when we talk about major institutions, how many black-led hospitals are there? Where can I go if I get injured where a black person is going to serve me from the time I walk into the reception desk to the time that my nurse comes and sees me to the time that my doctor comes and sees me and the time I get outpatient care? I'm not going to experience that. As a matter of fact, it'll probably be an immigrant person or a so-called white person who will probably be my caretaker, unless I end up in a nursing home or a care facility in which a CNA may come in, and the majority of those CNAs are African-American women. So when we look at the history, blacks have not advanced. We don't have any schools. We don't have any hospitals. We don't have any institutions, and we barely have thriving businesses here in North Omaha that are black owned and have existed for more than one generation. Not much has changed, Tom.
I would suggest to you, that opportunities are. Now, I will say this. I do think that it is important for young African American youth to see successful Black men and women.
I agree.
Because
100%.
I think that you have to see it to be able to achieve
I
it. So
agree.
I do agree, and I think that is something that is so important. So so I understand that. So I would suggest that maybe we don't have maybe as many African American doctors now as as you would like. But as more become doctors and more young kids can see that they can become doctors, you're going to see more in the future. Would you not agree?
I agree that there are more Afro-American doctors and lawyers and other professionals that are starting to come up. I agree. I definitely agree that they're starting to
it's all part of the process.
I agree that it is part of the process. However, there's been a great deal of fighting for that to take place, and it's still going on. But why do we have to fight so hard to get those? Just we're talking about just the professionals. We're not talking about the institutions. Again, I spoke of institutions. That means they have to be funded by something or someone. And if there's not enough black millionaires, billionaires that get trusts that they can start their own charitable organizations to donate to those institutions or organizations, then we don't have the infrastructure to really build those institutions. But we can definitely produce a few professionals here and there. And that's the problem. When you go to CHI, do you understand what CHI stands for? Catholic Health Initiatives. We're going to a Catholic hospital in order to receive our care. There's no Muslim hospital here. There's no Afro-American hospital here. Again, we're talking about an institution built off of a culture or a set of beliefs and a foundation that allows it to thrive, because the people that support it believe in the values of that particular institution. So when you have a cultural foundation, you have a set of values that your people stand on, and then you build institutions to support those values.
Would there be an African-American hospital if I was in Atlanta?
There is none in Atlanta.
I don't know. I mean,
there's no African American hospital in Atlanta. There's wellness centers that individuals are trying to build on their own that are outside of your traditional hospital, but no, there's no African American hospital.
And I may be wrong on this. Charles Drew, it was African American, was he?
Charles Drew was an African American man.
Okay, and Charles Drew Health Center right now is does an awful lot of.
Yeah, Charles Drew as a person was an African American man. Yes, and then there's a Charles Drew Health Center nonprofit, which is funded by primarily white philanthropy, to be honest with you. And it just has Charles Drew's name on it.
But you can't on one hand say that we've been economically deprived and then say, well, but it's the white people that are doing this.
No. What did I just tell you? You're not listening, Tom. I said we don't have the billionaires that are Afro-American or black to support the institutions that we would like to see in our communities through philanthropic means, because they were able to set up the trust or the charitable organizations that would donate to us. So if Charles Drew's not getting his money from a black person who has the money to donate to Charles Drew, then Charles Drew is not funded by a black person, which means if it's funded by primarily white-led institutions, which I'm not knocking them, I'm just saying, then they have the opportunity, if they wish to defund or fund Charles Drew at their will and also demand that Charles Drew make policy changes or do things based on their will because they are the providers of the resources. And I'm saying black people don't have the ability to be the providers of the resources because we don't have that many of us that are in position to do so.
Well, hopefully that changes. You know, I mean, because I
hope it changes too.
I look at, you know, like I said, from what I saw as a kid growing up, versus what I see today. And is it perfect? Of course not. Of course not. But there's, you know, but it's definitely an improvement. What do you see as we wrap this up? What do you see as the future? When will this be? Will it ever be resolved?
I think as long as black people are left alone and not interfered with by governmental institutions or governmental bodies that or other groups of people who wish not to see black people progress, and black people are able to just come together, identify what our majority problems are, and identify the cultural crisis that we're in, and then start to truly mend that and build the institutions, the language, the traditions, the values that will allow us to have a stable culture, then we will be able to have the pride in ourselves that we won't see conflict, we won't see a lot of social ills in our community, and then we will be able to come sit at a table with others who are in the same position, equal. We will be able to be equal at that table, and then we can see the United States or America as a whole truly thrive and grow without all of the social problems that it has, because the division now is not seen as division, it's seen as identity and respect.
It sounds to me, though, like what you're talking about is reminiscent of, like, you know, like maybe like the 40s with the, you know, with the Negro Leagues baseball teams and stuff, you know. I mean, so that it's a thing where you're your own economic community, you're your own economic ecosystem, and that, so you're basically, it almost sounds to me like you're suggesting that you want segregation.
No. What I'm suggesting is that blacks have their own. See, let's go back to, I'm glad you brought that up. Let's talk about the Negro League. Right?
Yeah.
The Negro League baseball leagues were packing stadiums. They were doing great baseball. As a matter of fact, white baseball wasn't doing so well. And so white baseball used to come to the Negro League games to try to scout players. And instead, they didn't want a lot of black radical players, so they picked Jackie Robinson and they bought him into the Dodgers. And when they bought Jackie Robinson in, they actually pulled from the black crowd that used to go, because black people wanted so badly to watch a black player play a white player. And the Negro League actually was challenging the Major League Baseball to games to where black players could play white teams. And the sports heads or figures didn't want that to take place. And so they said, you know what, we'll take one of you and we'll bring you into the sport. And so now Hollywood has turned it into this big thing. And historically, the story is, oh, Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. Well, first, who put the barrier up? The reason why blacks had to create their own teams is because they weren't allowed to play at white stadiums. That's why. So segregation created that. And segregation, then, when blacks started to thrive off of it, they said, well, we don't need that. We need to bring it in. And that's what happened. So it wasn't that blacks were number one trying to. Blacks wanted to play white players, but
well, actually, I used to live in Kansas City, and when I lived in Kansas City, I became friends with Buck O'Neill, and also with Bob Hendricks, who's in charge of the Negro Leagues Museum. Okay. So I know a little bit about the history. I know a little bit about the history of this. Okay. Yep. And so I'm familiar with that, and I'm familiar with what what Buck O'Neill had a real good life playing for the Negro Leagues. Had a real good life playing for the Negro Leagues, and that, and it was never a thing where it was, they used to barnstorm. They used to barnstorm with the white players. It may not have been officially sanctioned by the Major League Baseball. But the teams would also, Bob Feller and Buck O'Neill. Had a good friendship. Because they played against each other back in the day. I mean, so. You make it sound like, obviously we had problems with it. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. But we don't have that problem today. I mean, it's...
because black players are playing for white-owned teams. And so that's why it's not a problem. Black players are making millionaires and billionaires out of the owners of these teams. And these owners are not primarily Afro-American.
But are those owners not making millionaires out of these African-American players?
Oh, of course they are. But these players are playing. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
So
And no, I know.
they don't have time to go back in the community and go shop at the local burger joint. They're playing basketball, football, and all the other sports.
And when they retire, they got a pocket full of money and they got this opportunity.
Again, and we're talking. See, the thing is, whenever I have a conversation with a so-called white person about,
Why do you say so-called white person? I am a white person.
No, because you don't have to be white. That's what I'm saying. I'm a so-called black person because I don't want to be called a black person. I like to be called whatever tribe or history that I would know if it wasn't taken from me. So I say so-called here and there because I want to make sure I'm being respectful. It's not a disrespectful thing. It's to be respectful of the fact that you're a Czech person and you don't have to be white. So when I say so-called.
Okay.
So when we talk about a so-called white person, when we're talking about so-called white people, we're talking about groups of people who own whole systems. When you mention black people, you recognize that you're often mentioning these one-offs or these individuals or these anomalies in these professions that kind of pop up here and there. But you see, we don't own those institutions that we've been having these whole conversations about. And that's intentional. That's been historically intentional, that blacks have been left out of ownership of whole industries. So we'll never get distribution. We'll never be able to own whole industries because, and it's not about segregation, it's about separation equally. If you look at go to Chicago, right? You've been to Chicago, right?
Chicago, yes.
Okay. There is a Chinatown. There's a Polish part of Chicago. There's all types of different ethnic groups that have pockets in the cities. And you see that in a lot of major cities, that ethnic groups contain pockets of the cities. What's wrong with black people having a pocket of the city that they not only own and control,
I didn't
but
say
have...
anything was wrong with it.
No. And that's what I mean. So when you say segregation, I'm not trying to take us back to segregation. I'm just saying give Afro-Americans the fair chance to have a pocket of their community that is just as well established as every other pocket of other communities. That's all I'm asking for. So I'm asking for separation that is equal, that makes sense.
If you get the chance, see the movie My Omaha.
Right on.
Leo is a main part of it. The story itself is just very, very interesting, very fascinating, and it will be. I'm sure it will be streaming at some point in time. You'll be able to see it then, and perhaps I've also heard rumors that the movie may be coming back to Omaha, and so when it does. Because it sold out when it was here before. It was here for like 2 weeks. Yeah, and
2 weeks. It got extended one more week.
It was supposed to maybe just did a few showings to begin with, then it just like, we got to keep on showing it because the demand was there. So I think it's coming back to Omaha. When it does, make it a point to see the movie. And Leo, I enjoyed the conversation. I don't know if we resolved anything, but maybe we understand each other a little bit better now, and move forward with it, man. And
I appreciate it.
And I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Likewise.
Don't forget to like the Becca's Talking Facebook page. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. By the way, the YouTube channel. Got a lot of great podcasts that we've been doing now for over a year. And so there are a lot of great podcasts there. There's all sorts of topics and conversations. You'll find something that you'll really be enthralled with when you check out the Becca's Talking YouTube channel. Till next time, take care. Thanks, and bye, y'all.